Okay, so we have the setup here, as of course you've noticed, in a strange way. Last week we were facing that wall, and we could see what I did last week was we talked about the last 12 of the 24 lithographs starting here. So if we were facing this way, we could see everything. What I'm going to do this week is starting over there at the beginning and going through here, the first 12. And if we were facing that wall, you wouldn't see this, and if we were facing this wall, you wouldn't see that. So I suggested that we set up this way. So some of these are from some angles around the corner, and I'm going to try to not make that too big an impediment. If you feel like it when we get to a lithograph that you can't see and you feel like walking around so you can, I don't mind at all that you move around. Okay, so last week, as I just said, what we did was a brief introduction to Chagall and these lithographs, and then we looked in some detail. And we had a wonderful conversation. I didn't do all the talking here. We all put together our sense of some of the ways in which we can understand these lithographs, and I intend to do the same thing now. Talk for a few minutes by way of introduction, and then we'll try to get a sense of what these lithographs display and show us. So, what we have here is a series of 24 lithographs, highlights of the book of Exodus, the second book of the Bible. And one of the fascinating questions about this series is from the variety of scenes from which Chagall could have taken his pictures, he's making choices. So, for example, of the 10 plagues, and the 10 plagues in the Bible take 6 or 7 chapters. So the book of Exodus is 40 chapters in length. 6 or 7 is 40%, 30%. He represents only one of the 10 plagues. So certainly the 10 plagues are dramatic, and we can well imagine an artist who wants to depict the book of Exodus might definitely do more than one plague. So I think it's telling, and we're going to get into this, that Chagall chose only one. He couldn't ignore them, so he did the bare minimum rather than taking the variety of dramatic plagues and rendering them. So a word or two about Chagall himself. He was raised in a remote village in present-day Belarus. Chagall's Jewish heritage in that shtetl community proved to be one of the major influences of his art. His art is characterized by imagery drawn from this quaint Jewish village, including the animals of Chagall's childhood, his strong family heritage, and the Jewish faith and practice. Okay? Shtetl life, all of the elements there, as well as his Jewish commitments. Chagall endeavored to express the spiritual meaning and the moral message found in the Bible through his paintings, through these lithographs, etchings, and other original prints. He did another Bible series over a period of years, 105 etchings, which is regarded as a masterpiece. I don't know them. He rendered them, I believe, in the early 30s, and then put them aside for 20 years and finished them in the early 50s. One author says the following, that Marc Chagall fabricated a mystical world of lovers, musicians, and artists in his work. He chose lithography as a print medium that could offer him almost unlimited painterly freedom to explore this world. Since lithography is a technique where the artist can work directly on the printing plate or lithostone, the resulted prints, and this is very important, convey the spontaneity of Chagall's brushstrokes and his drawn lines. We're going to think a little bit about his lines. Lithography also allowed Chagall to work in, and this is another important idea, lush color, which he viewed as his métier, and for which Chagall has become renowned. Chagall's lithographs are now among the most collected artworks of the 20th century. Let me say something about Chagall's central themes. First of all, Chagall has a particular view of enemies. There are enemies in this story, the story of the Exodus. There's the Pharaoh, there are the taskmasters, and there's Amalek. And you remember Amalek from last week, the Amalekites who attacked the Israelites escaping from Egypt from the rear. And the Amalekites become a kind of byword throughout history for enemies. So the Amalekites are a very central opposing force in biblical religion and beyond. What Chagall does with these enemies in the Bible is to dramatically soften them, to render them less and less enemies. So, for example, the Pharaoh in picture number 8, as we'll talk more about when we get to it, is a remote figure, almost a passive figure, certainly doesn't look like an enemy. The taskmasters in picture number 3, which we'll get to. In this picture, is this the one? There are just a few taskmasters, and this is a picture of Moses among the people. There's one there, there's one there, but by and large, a bright color and not oppressed-looking people. So, neutralizing the Pharaoh, neutralizing the taskmasters. And if we look at the picture which renders the Amalekites, which it doesn't, it's this one right here with which we started last week. This is the picture of Moses reacting to the Amalekites in blood-red representation. He's angry, but the Amalekites are nowhere to be seen. So one of the keys, it seems to me, of understanding what Chagall is up to is the way in which he renders the biblical enemies. One way to understand what Chagall has done here is to say, yes, Chagall is celebrating Judaism and the Jewish tradition with a deep and intrinsic understanding of the Jewish heritage. But, and now I quote him, "For me, these paintings represent dreams and hopes for," here's the key word, "humanity, and not for any one people alone." Let me say that again. "For me, these paintings represent dreams and hopes for humanity, and not for any one people alone." So you can see that Chagall is particularistic in his celebration of Judaism and the Jewish tradition, but he's trying to broaden his cultural and spiritual palette to include all human beings. And in this case, one can see what he has done with what I might call biblical dualism. Good guys versus bad guys. And the good guys are very good, and the bad guys are very bad. And Chagall softens that dualism, almost rendering it out of existence. Let's talk for a second about Chagall's inspirations. First, dreams. Chagall at one point said, "I did not see the Bible, I dreamed it." So that, yesterday I did a bar mitzvah of a wonderful, very, very talented young boy. And what he did in his speech is he found what interested him through the things that are part of his own life and thought. So that we do, all of us, don't we? We read our texts, we read our newspapers through the prism of our predilections. And part of the task of reading is to try to put those predilections aside if one of our goals is to understand what the author is saying and not just what we would like the author to say. But nevertheless, we do see through the prisms of our own thinking. And when Chagall says, "I did not see the Bible, I dreamed it," we can see that he is rendering what he has done here through the medium of his own predilections. Okay? So he's trying to do two things at once. He's trying to render what the Bible has to say. On the other hand, he's giving us a powerful and personalized interpretation of what the Bible says. And all reading is a combination, in one proportion or another, of hearing what the author is saying and putting our own impulses into what we're reading. Dreams. Another inspiration for Chagall are the memories of his childhood, of his shtetl youth. And we can see in his depiction of the people something like that, and we'll talk more about that. Another inspiration is fantasy and whimsy and humor. There are birds wearing crowns. There are people floating in the air. And this, of course, is a product of whimsy, but it may also have a deeper meaning as well. We see distorted human figures. There is, in one of these pictures right here, this is Moses with a green face. He has painted other individuals with green faces, one of them an old Jew with a green face. And here's what Chagall had to say about why he did this. "I had an impression that the old Jew was green. Perhaps a shadow fell on him from my heart." Now, isn't that glorious? This is a way in which, after all, green is a very soft and inviting color. And perhaps it was an attempt of him to draw out the elements of common humanity. Perhaps a shadow fell on him from my heart. There's also, as I've just intimated a minute or two ago, the idea of integration. Not only the integration of Egyptians and Israelites, let's say, but also the integration of heaven and earth. Heavenly elements, for example, angels, are rendered very close to earthly elements. The gap between heaven and earth is often broken down. They exist on the same plane as nature and as human life. He once spoke about the meeting point between the mundane and the magical, and not two different, separable domains. Let me say a couple of more words about Chagall and the Bible. I'm going to quote him. "Ever since childhood, I've been captivated by the Bible. It has always seemed to me, and it still seems to me today, the greatest source of poetry imaginable." Think about that. The greatest source of poetry imaginable. "Ever since then, I have sought its reflection in life and in art. The Bible is like and here's a key concept as far as I'm concerned, the Bible is like an echo of nature. And this is the secret I have tried to convey in my work. And I want to say something about this echo of nature in just a few minutes. I want to say something about Chagall and color. André Malraux, who at the time was the Minister of Cultural Affairs in France, commissioned Chagall in 1960 to paint a new ceiling on the ceiling of the Paris Opera, which was executed in the summer of 1964. And here's what Malraux said. What other living artist could have painted the ceiling of the Paris Opera in the way Chagall did? He is, above all, one of the great colorists of our time. And I just happened to look at this morning a picture of the ceiling, which is quite magnificent. A sphere in the middle and then around the perimeter, in which he renders each of the composers he tries to depict. And each, this should not surprise us at this moment, is also rendered in a particular color. So that in the middle, 4 composers, Bizet, rendered in red, Verdi, yellow, Beethoven, blue and green, Gluck, green. So this already gives us a strong sense of the importance of color to Chagall. Picasso said the following about Chagall, and when I read this quote, the author who brings it says, Picasso, in one of his rare generous moments, here's what Picasso said, when Matisse dies, Chagall will be the only painter left who understands what color is. Chagall talks about the combination of color, dreams, and love. Here's what Chagall says. In our life, there is a single color. If you were to say what your single color is, what's the most important color to you? What would you say?
Sapphire blue.
Sapphire blue.
Purple.
Purple. Yellow.
Red.
Red. I'm a green person. Here's what Chagall says. In our life, there is a single color, as on an artist's palette, which provides the meaning of life and art. It is the color of love. Another commentator says that perhaps no other artist has come close to depicting a life of joy, of color, and of love as Marc Chagall. Chagall says the following, color is 2 things. It is chemistry and it is love. Further, he said, I am interested in rendering that clamorous love that I have for humankind. Clamorous love. Loud, noisy, evocative, emotional love that I have for humankind. And on his primary inspiration, he says, if I create from the heart, nearly everything works. If from the head, almost nothing. That's a little overstated, but we certainly do love the first part of that. If I create from the heart, nearly everything works. If from the head, almost nothing. And one more idea. Isn't it love, he says, that inspires painting and color? And isn't painting a reflection of our inner self, thus making skills less important? Color and lines reveal your character and pass on your message. color and lines. Those are two elements we'll want to explore in these depictions. Color and lines reveal your character. I'm not quite sure I understand that. The character of the author, of the painter, sounds like it, but I don't know how one does that. And passes on your message. That part of it I really like. Color and lines reveal your character and passes on your message. And perhaps there is one more element in what Chagall is doing, and that is the use through painting of metaphor. Metaphor is X is Y. One thing is another. Now that can be both true and false. If I say Achilles is a lion, that's false. Achilles is not a lion. But it's also true. Because Achilles, so the metaphor wants to insist, has some of the attributes of a lion. This is the power of metaphor over simile. A simile would be, Achilles is like a lion. That's a pretty pallid comment, isn't it? Yeah, he's like a lion. Is he a lion? Is much more provocative. Or a metaphor from Emily Dickinson, which is, I think, is my favorite metaphor. Friends, she says, are gems. But she's not done yet. Friends are gems, infrequent. Should we pause on that for a minute or two? Friends are not gems, but they are gems, and like gems, they are infrequent. That's the power of metaphor. So one commentator makes the following comment. The range of emotive and whimsical figures and motifs in Chagall's work led a certain commentator to say that Chagall alone returned metaphor triumphantly to modern painting. Chagall is a metaphorist. Two comments, both of which I have quoted earlier and said I was going to come back to them. Ever since childhood, I have sought the Bible's reflection in life and art. Here comes the metaphor. The Bible is an echo of nature. And this is the secret I've tried to convey. The Bible is, here's my rendering of it, somewhat pedantic. The difference between poetry and the explanation is that the explanation doesn't do justice to the poetry. An echo of nature suggests that the book of Exodus and any attempt to interpret it is an attempt to find the universal in the particular. How is it that the Bible is not only a particular story at a particular time in history, but it also represents the larger and deeper reality of human existence? And Chagall says, this is the secret I have tried to convey. For me, he goes on to say, these paintings represent the dreams and hopes for humanity. Okay? So this is not, again, just a particular story, but it tries to reach beyond it, to what we dream and for what do we hope. And he goes on to say, and not for any one people alone. So as I say here, the Bible represents reality. This is a challenge that I think Picasso is interested in handling. And both as both what exists, what kind of existence is reflected here, and for what it hopes. So these depictions are both an attempt to describe humanity and also to dream about what is possible. So if some of this is true, we'll think about seeing it in these pictures in a moment. So what we want to do now is begin to look at these depictions. I hope all of you have this. And the reason I bring this and some others, let me just show you. I didn't have time to copy them. Here we have Chagall's depiction with the title Birthday 1915. And you can see that the man is kissing the woman in a very, very strange way. And you can see the curvature. He is turning back to her, so that the very distortion is a way of bringing some of the emotion out of something that might be seen as pedestrian, a kiss. Here, it too is another picture. I didn't put down the title here, of an artist at an easel, but the artist is upside down. Well, I think this is okay. Can you see the artist is upside down?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, the artist is upside down. So, this picture that you now have in front of you is a rendering of Chagall's wife, Bella. And you can see that he is right side up and she is upside down. So that, what exactly does that mean? It certainly calls our attention to this and forces us in a way to ask ourselves, what does this mean? Why does the artist deliberately distort reality? Or I might put it differently. Is this representational art or non-representational art? And the answer is both. We have those faces, representational. But it's rarely or ever that people kiss in this way. So I might say that it expresses Chagall's love for his wife. That turns his world upside down in a good way. Okay? So let's take a look at the first of our pictures. And that's the so-called frontispiece. Okay? What I take it is on the cover. Now, if you have this, and if you look at the first thing, the first rendering in the upper left-hand corner, you can see that it's right side up. Well, I asked Katya about this, and Katya said that she and Sue had a conversation about this in the fall, wondering which is really the right way. This is right side up, and this is upside down, or this is right side up, and this is upside down. And Katya and Sue said that this is the right way. Okay? So you can see why I brought the picture of Chagall kissing his wife and the other upside down pictures, because this seems to be one of the ways in which Chagall renders, how do I finish that sentence? Whatever he wants to render. And that, of course, is subject to our interpretation. What is this? It's a depiction of the giving of the Ten Commandments. Can you see? So this is misleading here. What we have here is, I don't know where to stand. Okay. We have Moses. We know it's Moses. How? Horns. Okay. Horns or rays of light. We talked about this at some length last week. Because, just to review it quickly, the horns of Moses come into cultural history when St. Jerome translated the Bible into Latin. Okay? It wasn't the first translation into Latin. There was the Old Latin, and this is what he called the Hebrew Veritas, from the Hebrew manuscript itself. And the word Karen, which is used for Moses when he comes down from the mountain in Exodus 34, he's Karening. Karen, Hebrew, ing, which is often translated, and probably correctly, rays of light. But that word also means horns. And so Jerome bequeathed to the Western tradition the notion that Moses, and by implication the Jews, have horns. That's where it comes from. Well, this can be seen as a kind of malevolent interpretation, or, as other commentators want to suggest, it can connote rays of light. In some of these pictures, the horns actually commingle, this isn't a good example of it, with something above, and so they're a way of connecting heaven and earth. In the Song of Hannah in 1 Samuel chapter 2, she uses this word to represent nobility and strength. Okay? So just to review the horns issue. So this is Moses, and you can see he's receiving the Ten Commandments. And there is at the bottom here, you don't see it in this picture very well, there is a hand coming out of the dark in the lower left-hand part of the picture. You see it? Those of you who are close to it. As if this is the giving of the Torah to Moses. Okay? And then we have these two animals. I'm not sure what they mean. This is a bull. Maybe it's the golden calf. This is a bird. Anybody have a way to understand these two animals? Any thoughts about it?
Because Jewish people panicked God for not giving them any food, and the quail were then produced, and they were fed by God. That's
good. That's good. I mean, I say good because it's imaginative. How do I know it's right? So a negative image of an animal and a positive image, food and idolatry, which Chagall has rendered upside down. I mean, it works this way, doesn't it? It works this way, right side up. Upside down is a provocation. Rather than, look at this, and and there's Moses. Oh yeah, there are the Ten Commandments and a couple of animals upside down. Let's go on to the next picture. But if it's upside down, the artist is saying to me, pay attention to this, because I've distorted the way in which reality is depicted. Jackie?
So there's no signature so that we know which is the bottom?
I think it's a good point.
That's the right way. Upside down is the right.
Is there a signature that? Okay, yes, Ellen.
If somebody early on it says Jerome, thank
St.
you.
Jerome.
Somebody with horns. Chagall certainly knew that Jewish people didn't have horns. Why did he propagate that?
Well, that's a good point. I mean, we don't know the answer to that. One reason, I've given a couple of possibilities, that horns represent strength, courage, nobility in the literature, and they also reflect kind of a vector going up and perhaps indicating some connection to the transcendent, to God. So Chagall may have had a wholly positive understanding of it. I do know that he admired what Michelangelo did in the statue at the grave of of Pope Julius II, I think. Amy?
If Moses was receiving the Ten Commandments, he would be looking up.
Yeah.
Wouldn't he? So not really upside down, looking up.
Okay, so you're saying that this doesn't reflect that idea.
It does.
Yeah.
He's leaning.
Oh, he's leaning. Oh, I see what you're saying. Oh, it's
Looking down.
well, he's looking down in this rendering. If it were right side up, if it were the other way, he would be looking up. This deconventionalizes it, doesn't it? You think he's looking up. Okay, so that's possible. Other thoughts about, let's talk for a minute about what Chagall might mean by this, or what it seems to us to connote. Katya? Wait a minute, don't, yes, of course. I was going to say wait.
Yeah, I thought it's an introduction to the story. It's a generalization. This story is about 10 Commandments, the golden calf, and an angel. I would say that the bird is kind of normally is an angelic presence.
Okay.
And Moses, who went completely meshugana over the entire.
He's Meshuggah what?
They really made them crazy. I mean, the whole story is crazy.
Oh, the story of the Exodus is crazy. Okay, so I like that. The story, in a way, is itself upside down.
Or it's yeah.
Okay.
There are lots of miracles, there's lots of magic, there are lots of stuff happening. You would get mad over it. You would be upside down.
So that's good. If you have a more secular view of reality, the book of Exodus challenges that, with God entering the plane of human history and diverting the natural law, of Moses going up on a mountain and up there 40 days and 40 nights without eating, all of the plagues, and so on, so that in a sense, it might connote, let me use another word here, it might indicate that the book of Exodus is countercultural. It represents another way of understanding reality, which might be considered the upside down from the way in which we live our daily lives. Both the book of Exodus and the rendering of the book of Exodus are attempts to, let me put it this way, problematize our commonplace understanding of the way things are. How about, because we got this, we got to this from that upside down rendering of his kissing of Bella. Maybe this suggests that the book of Exodus and these renderings are love stories. This is a story of passionate love, because those renderings represent a deep emotional attachment between the two people who are kissing. So maybe what Chagall is doing here is suggesting not only that you can expect something upside down or non-conventional, both in the book of Exodus and how I'm going to depict it. And also I want to depict this story fundamentally as a story of love, rendered through line, person, and color.
So Nancy has a comment.
Yes.
I was just thinking from what Amy had said about perspective, because I think that's also certainly a piece of these. That being the first of the 24 lithographs, it's almost as though we're starting from above, not on the plane of the earth, but we're looking on those that creatures are also, on their side. We're looking from above. And so the story begins perhaps not from us, but from something higher.
That's interesting. So the us is the receiving of the Ten Commandments. This points to something above the receiving, namely the giving.
And I think this could be the same with Bella, that love is higher, is something more than just the day-to-day, it's beyond.
Nice. So that love, in a way, is a gift. It's a transcendence in which we can participate. Nice. Any other thoughts about it? It is, however we understand or don't understand it, it's a very provocative way of starting the series, isn't it? In a way, it's the alarm clock of this series. Wake up, pay attention, I've got something to tell you. Okay, any other comments about this? I love this one, this depiction. All right, let's move on now to the first representation in the story. This is, if you're following me, from Exodus 2:6, chapter 2:6, and let me just read what Chagall or what is written here. Then the daughter of Pharaoh opened the ark and saw it was a child. I think it's not insignificant that Chagall starts with this scene. After all, it is in chapter 2. He omits or passes right over chapter 1 and goes right to, what is this? This is the daughter of Pharaoh pulling the baby Moses out of the Nile River. Okay? He starts with an enemy who is one of the most exalted figures in the entire Bible. Because it says, I guess it doesn't say so here, she saw the child and she had pity on it. Okay? So this sense of compassion, where does it come from? It comes from right in the center of the power of the Egyptian tyranny. It comes from the palace of Egyptian tyranny. In the Bible, right away, it seems to me, this is an anticipation of the defeat of Pharaoh. He's defeated from within, from his own daughter, from the beginning. And let's ask ourselves how this is depicted. First of all, if I'm not mistaken, there are no straight lines in this picture. Oh, this is close to straight. But nevertheless, they're wavy. Wavy lines soften a scene, don't they? I might even say they render them emotional as opposed to structural or architectural. And so what Chagall is doing here is he is rendering with emotion the daughter of Pharaoh in her compassion. What would you say about how she is, her shape? I mean, she could have been standing up straight. She could have been bent way over. Any thoughts about the choice of rendering her, Barbara?
I'm struck by something you said about Chagall and love, and also something of my own understanding of this section and the curve. Curves often are feminine, and so to me this has always been a story about love, many loves, midwives, so overcoming edicts with grand loves for some specifics. So Miriam's love, Moses' mother love, and I would replace pity, the word pity, with love for the infant. So I just see this as all the rounded love of the feminine, and it's always to me been a story about love, and I hadn't thought of it in terms of Chagall before.
And you think Chagall does a good job of rendering what you're describing?
It's the softening.
There's circles.
Softening.
Yeah.
There's circles?
Yeah. You know, the circles in the basket and Miriam's arms are a circle.
Uh-huh.
I mean, there's a totality of that.
A circle being a totalizer.
Miriam was floating, and the mother was waiting to be the
That's an interesting point. You can see, though, we might say her feet are on the ground. She doesn't seem to be planted. She seems to be weightless, and therefore rendered with some fantasy, maybe a dream image, but certainly not a heaviness. There's a lightness of being here. Jackie?
They couldn't have known this then, but to me it looks like the inside of a womb or an old sonogram.
Oh, okay, all right. You mean the basket?
Well, it just all looks like it's in some sort of fluid and dreamy and not fully formed.
The whole thing?
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. So, what's the dream? What's being?
There's a story that these women are going to tell us, and this little baby is the center and the kernel from which it will grow.
It's an anticipation, the womb, an anticipation of life to come in these depictions. I like that. Amy?
I think it's interesting that her arms, don't we bless our children on Shabbat and
Right.
put our hands above their heads? And I feel that in the image.
Interesting, because also, according to tradition, the priests bless the people with their hands. So if it's plausible to say so, this is a priestly gesture from an Egyptian woman, which may suggest, again, Chagall's attempt to universalize. It's not just the appointed priest who does these things, it's anybody who wants to act in a priestly way, say through blessing. So there you're giving an interpretation of the hands, which I think is plausible. Did you have something else, Barbara? I thought you did. Yeah, Jimena?
Well, all the curves and the circles suggest femininity and stuff like that. The arm, what strikes me about the arm is that how strong and muscular it looks. That there's power in this woman. And again, I love the way you said that the Pharaoh is defeated within his own home. She's a powerful.
That's interesting. Good. Not only softness, but also potency, power, represented physically by her arms, strong arms. Like it, yeah. Okay, let's move on to the next one. Where am I here? Okay, so Exodus chapter 2, verse 11. And in those days when Moses was grown, he went forth unto his brethren and looked on their burdens. Okay, so here is Moses. There are those horns. I think we ought to think a little bit about how Moses' hands are rendered in each of these pictures. Almost in every picture, Moses' hands are prominent and in different configurations. How would you understand the meaning of these hands? Jim?
The way the hands are, and these are my people.
Okay. Bringing them to him. Nice. Other thoughts about it? Maybe sympathy, maybe this is the same thing in another way. These are his people. This is the great exalted leader who is going to go into Pharaoh and demand escape, and is going to go up to get the Ten Commandments from God. And he's going to come down when they see the golden calf, and he's going to smash those tablets. I mean, this is a forceful, physical, dominant person who is represented here in a very soft way. My people. Okay? So, it does raise the question of what is a leader of a people? It's at least two components, isn't it? A person who has a normative vision, what we can be, and therefore a sense of holy dissatisfaction because we have a ways to go until we can be what we ought to be. That is the leader stepping outside the people and bringing them to the vision. The other component of the leader is not just to be outside the people, but to be a part of the people and recognizing, sympathizing their needs, their vulnerability. And that's the Moses that we see here, isn't it? Not the one who angrily is calling on the plague of darkness. Humble. Okay, very good. Very good. Notice we have to pay a little attention to the color. So this is an overall yellow. This is an overall on a brown blue in a way. We'll see some of them are divided in terms of color. A vertical patch here and then another very different in terms of color. And if you've got one color over the entire picture, that suggests one thing. If you've got two colors, not just two colors in one depiction, but two panels of color, that represents some tension, doesn't it? Opposition. So the very way in which Chagall constructs the color of each of these pictures does reflect something of what he's trying to convey through color. I mean, this idea that one of Chagall, why do I keep wanting to say Picasso? That Chagall was a great colorist who was using colors not just ornamentally, but as conveying meaning indirectly. Somebody else had their hand up. Yeah, Amy.
I had a different take, that his hands weren't humble, that he was saying, look what I had to do with my hands to change our history. That he's stepping out of time, he's looking at us. The people, the slaves behind them are busy at work. He's looking at us in the present and speaking to us now.
To us. Interesting.
And that his hands aren't passive, they're denoting action. You do.
So we now have two very different interpretations. Let me frame the difference this way. We have an interpretation which suggests that the hands are reaching in to the people through sympathy. And the SYM prefix together. Amy's interpretation is they're really reaching out. Look at the task I have. They're reaching to us. And maybe his face can suggest both. That he recognizes the burden that lies ahead of him, but also he's wary about what his people are experiencing. And what are they experiencing? They're experiencing bondage. They're experiencing slavery. Are Chagall's people suffering? You see them as suffering in what sense? In what sense are they suffering? Yeah.
If you look at the colors that are predominant, yellow, orange, and red.
Yes.
Those are colors of trauma as opposed to the calmness of blues and greens.
Okay.
So this is a time of trauma, and it's like, come on, we have to flee, we have to get out. It's almost like a speed of strong colors. And I think he's being drawn to say, come on, let's go, we have to leave. Grab what you can and let's go. And I think it's a very fast-moving portrayal as opposed to the calmness of gathering Moses out and the strength of her arms, taking him out and saying with the strength of her arms, I will take you and I will protect you. This is, let's go.
Interesting. I like that very much. So there's motion here.
That's a lot of motion.
And you know, the way I have looked at it is that this is the hustle and bustle of daily life under oppression, as if parallel to the life in the shtetl, which was full of peril and vulnerability. But nevertheless, people in some sense transcended that peril and lived their lives fully. So I see this as people living their lives, not especially suffering, the faces are not rendered as suffering, filled with the motion of daily life. Your interpretation is quite different, that this does represent the suffering of the people. And these sacks that they're carrying are not just the daily loaf of bread that they're bringing home, but they're prepared to leave. Very good, very good, very good. I love your comment about the color and what that connotes. My interpretation would be stronger with greens and blues. I like it, I like it. Katya?
I would connect both interpretations and say that this is not just relating to shtetl and to everyday life and to extremely dramatic moment. I would say that this moment is a pogrom.
Pogroms. Good. Yeah.
It's fire and they are escaping.
Right. So the pogroms is parallel to your interpretation and not to mine. Mine is... It's still the shtetl. Yeah. Good. Okay. Any other thoughts about it? So once again, I mean, we have some ambiguity. It can be read in two very, very different ways. Okay, let's move on to the next one. Now, those of you who are sitting back here cannot see it, but if you have this, do you all have this who can't see the picture? So, Moses at the burning bush. Okay, what is this? Exodus chapter 3, verse 2. Then the angel of the Lord appeared unto him in a flame of fire. There's that yellow, I take it, the sun in a certain way, in a flame of fire out of the midst of a bush. And he looked, and behold, the bush was not consumed. And notice his hands. What do his hands suggest to you? I'm sorry? Awe, a kind of awe. His mouth is open.
Supplication.
I'm sorry?
Supplication.
Supplication. He's kind of kneeling. Okay. There's God's name. Notice here, this is a good example of the horns merging with the revelation. So that suggests the interpretation where these are not horns, but these are elements of the connection, not only between Moses and the revelation, but between heaven and earth, that the one penetrates the other.
And also, where there are very strong verticals, the really strong horizontal are those rays coming from the heavens that connect with the his rays horns.
Good.
That
Good.
brings, that's where the action really is.
Here.
Yeah, the diagonals always.
Yeah, that's a good point. This you're suggesting the action, and this is sort of the passive, the receptive. Yeah. And Moses' color is totally different from any other color in the picture. What do you think that means? Is this a way of focusing on Moses or subordinating him to what is going on? Any thoughts about that? I'm sorry? Probably subordinating. And he does have a sense here of receptivity, of awe, when he's looking up, as recognizing the strangeness of this bush that is burning and not consumed. Okay, any other thoughts about this, Jim?
Well, the way his hand is like a pledge that he's, going to be loyal to this expedition that he's been asked to lead.
Nice. It's like a Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge that what I'm receiving is defining my mission, and I'm loyal to it. Yeah, Ellen?
I think that Moses represents humanity. He came up there dressed in what he was wearing. Whereas this scene is divine. So it does separate.
It does separate the human and the divine. Yeah, okay. And you're giving a kind of an interpretation of the fact that Moses alone is in a separate color, as if we're dealing with two realities here, the human and the divine, which are melded in space, if not in, and also, I guess, in time. Other thoughts? Let's move on to the next one. Exodus chapter 4, verse 3. He cast the rod on the ground, and it was turned into a serpent, and Moses fled from it. This is quite potent, isn't it? So this is that example of two vertical swaths of different color, the dark and the light. Moses here in white, and we see Moses in white several times. He's not in white here, which may support the idea of a twofoldness in the heavenly and the earthly. But here Moses is in white, and there's the serpent coming out of the rock, which I think is quite clever. And you see an angel pointing down. What's the role of the angel here? Continuity between heaven and earth. The angel is right down here. The blessing or the magic of this moment, which is conferred on the scene, it's not created from within the scene, right, is nevertheless very close. What about Moses' hands and his face? Look at his face. What can we read from this face? He's bemused. He's wary. He's a bit frightened. I mean, doesn't that face bring all of those things out? He's in a way stepping back, but he's embracing it. He sees that this is a confirmation in a way that God is going to be with him. What shall I tell the people, Moses says, and God then gives him this. It's a very dynamic picture, isn't it? A lot of motion, the serpent and Moses with his hand upraised and the other hand here more passive. Let's look at the next one. This is an extremely lovely picture. Chapter 4 of Exodus, verse 27. Then the Lord said to Aaron, "Go meet Moses in the wilderness," and he went and met him in the mount of God, and he kissed him. Notice that if one were to squint and barely look at it, it can seem to be one image, right? They're so close together, there's no space between them. The contour of one body resonates with the contour of the other one. So here is a friendship between brothers. Moses is declaiming, and Aaron is what? Reverent, accepting, admiring. We know who the leader is, but the leader requires an important other like Aaron, right? Moses is going to be angry at the people because he represents the ideal. Don't you remember the scene of the golden calf? After God is angry and Moses mollifies God, and then Moses comes down and he is angry, and he says to Aaron, "What did the people do to you?" And Aaron's response is essentially, "Look, the people are weak. Their leader was gone. I have to nurture the needs of the people. don't make such a big deal out of this. Moses is the one who stands apart, and Aaron is the one who is with the people once again. Moses is declaiming, Aaron is receptive, representing in some way their two. Notice, by the way, as well, that there is an anachronism here. Aaron has not yet received the symbols of his office. That will happen later. But he's already represented the mitre, the breastplate, there's the belt. You can see here at the very bottom, does the picture give this enough detail? The very bottom of his robe are the bells. Aaron is wearing bells because it's only the high priest that goes into the Holy of Holies one day a year. And to go into the center of holiness is extremely dangerous, right? It's this idea that the holy represents power. Some of you may know Rudolf Otto's great book, The Idea of the Holy, where he talks about holiness as mysterium tremendum et fascinans, the tremendous mystery, as well as the mystery causes us to shrink back. The fascination causes us to move forward. Take off your shoes, you're on holy ground. Being in the presence of the holy, this is a biblical idea, is danger. We have to treat that situation very, very carefully and in the right way. And that's why Aaron is wearing bells, because when he goes into the Holy of Holies and he confronts a dangerous situation and he wants to get out, he shakes his garment, and we can hear we need to go in to get him. So, what do you make of the anachronism that Chagall has already depicted the priest with the symbols, the accoutrements of the priesthood, long before he gets them? Also here. Any thoughts about that? I take it this was deliberate on Chagall's part. What about the idea that a narrative, which, since it takes place in time, is sequential? It's a sequence of the before, the present, and the after. And that's the idea of an anachronism, that it's not yet appropriate, which is the language of narrative. The language of art can treat temporally distinct events as simultaneous. This is the reality of a priest. And I want to represent it out of its time order to give you a sense right away of what a priest is. And Aaron represents that priesthood both in his garb and in his receptivity. If we do make it over here to this one, this is the splitting of the Red Sea. If you can see it in your, for those who can't see what's going on above, here, you see the Israelites are coming out of the Red Sea in dry land. See, they're walking this way. Ahead of them are the Egyptians. The water is split. You see the two billowing pillows of paint. That's the split of the Red Sea. And then the white comes together over the Egyptians, right? And they're going to be drowned. You see that? But the chronology is out of order. The chronology here is the people come out, and then the Egyptians go across the people follow the Egyptians. That's what it is. The Egyptians come first, and the people are following them.
Don't you think they're chasing them out?
Well,
they were chasing the Jewish people.
Well, it looks to me,
The sea, and then the sea splits.
it looks to me like the faces are facing forward and not going. And if I'm right about this, and I might not be, this is another example of the idea of simultaneity, that all of these ideas happen at the same time. Look here. Can you see this in your depiction of it? Where is it? Yeah, you can a little bit in that picture. This is an angel delivering the Torah. This is a scroll. Now, this scene takes place in Exodus chapter 14. The Torah is not given until chapter 20. And yet it seems to be given right here. Okay? So the angel is delivering it right here. Can somebody make something of this? Susan?
When I look at that, I almost see a female's internal organs.
You do?
Giving birth. Did you see that?
Oh, yeah. Oh, sure. Yeah. No, this is a birth narrative coming out through the waters, right? So in a certain way, this is a replication of the beginning of the Bible. The creation of the world is now paralleled by the creation physically represented through the canal, the birth canal. No, I think it's and this again is, now this we can attribute to the Bible, which Chagall replicates, and that is, in a way, the simultaneity of course they happen sequentially, but since they're the same thing, they're the birth of the universe and of the people, equally consequential to the birth of the universe. So seems to me that there are a couple of ways in which this can be understood. Chagall is suggesting simultaneity, that what we're going to have now is two great miracles. The miracle of the liberation of the people coming through the split sea, and the miracle of the giving of Torah. And he wants to just tell us that they're of the same type and therefore can be reflected at the same moment, even though it violates the sequence of the story. But one could ask, when one is dealing with the nature of things, you remember the idea of metaphor, that this is a story, but a story that represents larger realities. So when you're representing the nature of things, and let's assume the nature of things doesn't change, the nature of things is out of a temporal context, and so art can represent the universal without reference to the fidelity to the narrative of the story, which is what happens here. Right? This is a very strange picture in a way, which is, I think, the boldest of the renderings here. This is really my favorite picture because it is so strong. Moses, if you got close, you could see that there's Moses' hand. It doesn't seem to be gripping the rod. The rod seems to just be hanging by his hands. And if I'm right about this, that Chagall is trying to suggest that the Torah says, God says to Moses, hold your hand out over the waters. And then it goes on to say, and God split the Red Sea. This is clearly a divine action, but Moses is brought into it as a kind of actor. By making this rod delicate in his hand, seems to me Chagall is de-emphasizing the human and re-emphasizing the perennial themes of this picture. Another way to think about it is, what's the connection between the Red Sea and the giving of the Torah? The Red Sea is the necessary condition for the giving of the Torah. They have to be free before the Torah is given. Or to put it differently, there's no the point of the Red Sea is, among other things, the giving of the Torah. And that's why it makes sense to bring the Red Sea splitting and the Torah into the same picture. Jackie?
Well, I think since it's the angel with the Torah, it's a carrot, if you will. It's if you push forward and you go through, this is what you get.
Okay.
It's a reward from above. It's incentive for the people to keep going.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. So you're pointing to another way in which the two are connected.
That it is not actually at the same time, that the one is not of this world. It is just, this is what is coming to you if you keep going.
Okay, so you're returning to the sequence in a way. Yeah, okay. Yes?
I keep thinking of the role of Moses and how he's depicted by Chagall almost as the narrator of this story. Because we see him sort of in the corner there and looking up to the heavens, perhaps there, and here off to the side, as though he's not only a key figure in this, but he's also outside of it.
Uh-huh.
And he becomes sort of this universal giver of the story.
Interesting. Somebody interpreted this as Moses' hands, was that you, Amy? Moses' hands, we could see them as sympathetic, reaching in, but I think Amy wanted to suggest they're also reaching out. And you're suggesting that too, that Moses is a part of this picture, but in a way set apart.
Right, both. He plays both roles.
And he's very surprisingly minor in this picture, isn't he? Just in terms of how much space Moses takes up in the picture. So maybe Chagall is using Moses to point to the miracle, which is the main theme here. Don't you love the way the split sea is rendered? These pics of pillows, I call them pillows of white, and then how they come back. I mean, look, what happens in reality is that the water covers the Egyptians. So the artist has it as a dilemma. You want to represent it accurately, but if you cover the Egyptians, they're not in the picture. So this is a fanciful way of getting that reality by necessarily distorting what the picture says. But we of course get the point. And the Egyptians have their hands up and they're crying, and there's somebody on horseback. You remember the horse and its rider goes into the sea, and so on. And there's the angel. What's the role of the angel here?
Helping to lead them.
I'm sorry?
She's helping to lead them and to guide them and to help Moses to guide them.
Good, okay. Right, the one who is, as you say, guiding the people. Kenny, did you?
Future. She's the future, and it's somewhat dreamlike.
Okay, very good, very good. And also that Chagall wants us to be sure to notice that this is a miracle. And so you have a divine figure at the helm of it, so to speak. It's an extremely rich picture, isn't it? Katya?
Well, I really like the idea about spontaneity. I think that's super interesting. And there might be some maybe simpler way to think about this spontaneity is that Chagall kind of says, guys, I know that you know that I know that this story is about, if we were to think, what are the most dramatic moments of that story? The crossing of the Red Sea, these passed through, these guys were drowned, and then we got the Torah. So that's what the story is about. And he knows that we know that he knows.
No.
And in many ways, he does it in almost every image. Like we know that he knows that we know that Aaron is a priest. And Moses is who he is. And so he's really, he operates on the knowledge that those are tremendously well-known images and stories. And so he's quite free in doing what he has to do.
That's really a wonderful point. So that if Chagall were to do something on the book of Chronicles in the Bible, which is also a story, we don't know that story, so he can't count on our background knowledge. And here he knows that we know that he knows we know. I like that. Yeah. The artist, that's a good point. The artist should be thinking about what is the starting point for the auditor of my work. And to the degree that we have some knowledge, this gives the artist much more leeway in what he can do with it. I mean, if we just came to this picture without knowing the story, we'd wonder what the heck is going on here. But now, since we know so much, yeah, I like that very much. We're just about out of time. Let's just take this one. This is Miriam. Where is it here? There it is. Exodus 15. And Miriam, the prophetess, sister of Aaron, and really sister of Moses, well, this is quoting the Torah, sister of Aaron, took a timbrel in her hand, and all the women came out with her with timbrels and dances. So, what do we have here that is noteworthy to you?
No image of Moses.
I'm sorry?
There's no image of Moses.
There's no Moses here. And actually, at the end of the Song of Moses, which is rendered by Moses and the Israelites, we hear the voice of Miriam reflecting some of the words of the Song of Moses. So they're also reflected in the biblical story as being by themselves as well. So that's maybe another example that Chagall knows that we know that, and therefore this represents something that is both biblical and interesting. What else do you see here of interest? How about all the different colors? It's an extremely rich palette here, isn't it? And if the colors represent emotion of different kinds, then this is a very, very emotional rendering, isn't it? The singing by the women of the Song of Liberation. Here is Miriam, who is very outsized. Why? I don't know. Anybody have a thought? Susan?
The color thing I wanted to ask you about, because it is like all the colors of the rainbow, but missing my favorite, which is purple. And I noticed that purple's missing from almost all of them.
Oh, interesting.
And is that just what it is, or does that mean it?
No, that's just what it is. No, I'm kidding. How do I know what it is?
Because you think about the band color purple, and there's this beautiful line where it says, really makes God angry when you walk by the color purple.
Oh, that's interesting. So you now have a hypothesis that something, the color purple is missing. And if you were interested, you'd go back now over all these pictures and maybe even into the story to see why that might be. And there are two possibilities. It's totally accidental. You can't find enough evidence to justify the hypothesis. Or this is a key that unlocks another element of the story, possibly. Yes?
If you look at religious books where they do the portraits in them, or they're the gilded with the purple's not in there.
Is that true?
It's the blue, the green, the yellow, and the red.
Yeah. All right.
It's
What are the primary colors? What are the
red, yellow, blue.
red, yellow, and blue? And purple is it tertiary? I think I was sick during that day in 4th grade. Barbara?
I was curious, I don't know the whole library so well. Miriam is partially unclothed. So I was curious about, is she represented like a deity of some sort or some fertile symbol. I have no idea.
Oh.
I just noticed that it's different from all the others.
That's an interesting point. Though it's true, I believe we see here sleeves on her arm. Now that could be a bracelet, actually. Yeah. Well, that's interesting. So a kind of goddess in a way. All right, interesting thought. I had not thought of that at all. Marty?
When you refract a light beam, you get red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet, not purple. Roy G. Bibb with a V.
Okay, very good. I like that. Right. Roy G. Bibb. Ellen?
To me, she almost looks like an angel above the women. And I think this is honoring women. No other pictures have only, well, that one.
Yes, but I think that's a very good point. And notice that it sits right next to this one, and we have at the top an angel, and we have here at the top, I think that strengthens your view, actually, the parallelism between the two. We can't help but notice structurally that each sits in the same spot in the picture. Yeah.
It makes me think of the idea, like deity, but fertility, because her breasts are so prominent.
Right.
And the use of blue in her skirt, which is often connected to birth waters and all of that. And there she is in the middle. And so again, she's foretelling the future of the people of Israel will go forth and multiply.
Nice. Wow. So Miriam, it becomes very symbolic here in a variety of ways. Right, okay. All right, so I think we need to stop. You can see there's much more for us to look at. This particular one, if you have a moment at either now or another time, take a look at Pharaoh in this picture, who is totally meek and inconsequential. Look at how far back into the picture Chagall puts him. I think this is a good illustration of his wanting to mute the enemy feature of this story. Pharaoh is really quite impotent, we might say. Thanks for coming. These are great.